We're good.
Good evening and welcome back to our Parshah webcast. We are going to be discussing this week's portion, which is the portion of Lech Lecha, which begins the story of Avram. Before I begin, let me remind everyone that this class can be, if you want to sponsor a webcast, for a yard site, for a birthday, for an anniversary, for any other occasion, you can please call our office at 954-349-6565. And the Torah learned by so many hundreds will be in the merit of your loved one or yourself in honor of this occasion. So, the portion of Lech Lecha is truly a happy portion, a Lebedika portion, as the Rebbe quotes his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, who says that the portion of Bereshis starts off positive, nice, exciting, the creation of the world, but ends on a sad note, that God was upset with the world. He wants to destroy the world. The portion of Noach starts off, the bulk of it is sad. He destroys the world, the whole story of the flood and the generation of the dispersion with the Tower of Babel. But it ends off on a good note with the birth of Avram. The truly happy portion is the portion of Lech Lecha. Because every day, in every single section of this portion, we live and we talk about and live the story of Avram. Who was Avram? So you all know who Avram was, Abraham. But the Rambam gives a description of Abraham in a very detailed way. He describes what the world looked like. What the world was, the consciousness of people at that time. And he gives us a whole historical background to how the world, from the time of creation, ended up in the time of Avram, which is about 2,000 years, how the whole world fell into the worst sin of the Torah, which is idol worship. And it goes through the whole process, how this happened. The early idol worshippers were not direct idol worshippers. They began to attribute the first mistake that mankind made, which is in the time of Enosh, which was, I believe, the son of Seth, grandson of Adam. They didn't worship idols outright. According to the Rambam, the mistake that they made was they began to introduce a new idea. That God exists, but that God appointed ministering forces in the world that have power. And therefore they should be thanked when they provide, and they should be prayed to in order that they should provide. For example, the sun. They didn't deny the existence of God. They just said that God created the sun and gave the sun the power for growth, for vegetation, for warmth, and we should thank it when it gives us, when we have a nice day outside. And they began to thank the sun in addition to thanking Hashem. What is the problem with this? Sounds like a pretty menschliche approach. In the Torah we have a mitzvah to honor your father and mother. Why do we have a mitzvah to honor your mother and father? Because they gave you life. And you should thank them for that. And therefore we honor them. So why don't we have the mitzvah to honor the sun for giving us light? And it does, it gives us light. And so on and so forth. All these other forces in creation, which God created. Why does that amount to idol worship? If you thank the sun, you're considered an idol worshiper. Whereas if you thank your father, you're considered a good Jew. And of course the reason is, it's quite obvious. mistake that Enosh and his generation made was they attributed to the sun a bit more than what the sun was really capable of. Meaning, the sun that, according to the Rambam, was the metaphor that is given by the sages to explain why this was a mistake, was because the sun is like in the hammer in the hands of a carpenter. When the nail gets knocked into the wall, how do you knock the nail into the wall? With a hammer. So would anyone in his right mind thank the hammer for doing this? Or you're going to thank the carpenter? You're going to thank the carpenter. Why not the hammer? Because the hammer had no choice in the matter. It's just a tool in the hands of the craftsman. The sun has absolutely no choice whether to give light or not. It has a brain, by the way, you should know. The Rambam says that the sun has a brain. The sun, the moon, they have wisdom, they have intellect. Did you know that? No. The Rambam says that, yeah. And he says not only do they have intellect, they have more intellect than a human being. Yeah, that's what it says.
Don't they have emotion too?
I don't know about emotion. Well, Rambam says that they have the wisdom and understanding. Okay, we won't get into that now. We won't get into that. The point is, it has no choice to give light on that. Can't wake up one day in the morning and say, today I'm not giving light. It's like a hammer. So what are you thanking the hammer? You're giving a little bit too much credit where credit does not due. A mother and father, on the other hand, did have a choice whether to have you or not. So therefore they deserve a big thank you. And the Torah tells you to thank them. That's godliness, and this is idol worship. But that was the mistake that the first generation made. The Rambam goes on to explain what happened after that. That later on the people got focused only on the sun. And as the generations proceeded, they began to they totally forgot about Hashem's existence, to the point where it was totally out of anyone's mind. They didn't even know that there was such a thing as a God. And all they did was began to start worshipping all kinds of forces and gods, and don't ask what. To the point where they stooped to such ridiculous behavior that they began to worship stones and wood. Literally, they carved out images and made them into idols and believed in them. And this is what the world looked like by the time Avram was born. Avram comes on the scene, the Rambam says, until this great, powerful individual came on the scene. Imagine you're alone in the world, and you begin to, he says what happened to him. He was an idol worshiper, Avram. Avram in his younger age was an idol worshiper, a devoted idol worshiper. I heard once an old Hasidic word that you know why he began to serve God with such power and such passion and such truth? Because he would worship idols with such truth. He was a man of truth. So whatever he did was real. When he was into an idol, he was into it for real. And that's why he was able to see the fallacy in it. A real person is going to see the fallacy in all of it. And will reach Hashem. But that's what happened to Avram. He began to wonder, what is this? How could that piece of stone be considered a god, and so on and so forth? Until he reached the knowledge of God. It's this conflicting statements among our sages. When was it that he recognized the existence of Hashem? Some say it was when he was 3 years old. Some say when he was 40 years old. Some say when he was 48 years old. So the rabbis reconcile it that he did recognize Hashem when he was 3, but at a very simple level. When he was 40, he reached a higher level of understanding. He was 48, even higher. Until he understood the perfect understanding and knowledge of Hashem, he even authored a book called the Sefer Yetzirah. The Sefer Yetzirah was written by Avraham Avinu. Naturally, when you have a person like this, Hashem is going to take a liking to him. And he did. Because not only did he serve Hashem, but he began to promote it and began to publicize his newfound truth. And it costed him his life almost at one point, because they threw him into a furnace. We all know the Medrash, the story. That Nimrod was angry at him and says, you're taking away, because he had a whole thing going with all the idols. So he threw him in the furnace. and a miracle happened. He survived. His brother didn't survive. His brother was like this one of these wishy-washy guys. The Medrash tells us, Rashi quotes it, that Horan was standing on the sides and he was not sure if God, what to do here, So he said, you know what, I'll see what happens to Avram. If he survives the fire, I'm with him. If he doesn't, I'm with them. And he survived the fire, so he went into the fire also. And he got burned. But Horan is looked at in the eyes of our sages, on the one hand, as a kind man that can make up his mind. On the other hand, he has a great merit. He actually gave up his life for the belief in Hashem. At the end of the day, you can't take that away from him. How many people would actually go into a fire? So there was something about him that shouldn't be just discounted like that. But to move on in the story of Avram, by the time he's 75, he gets a call from Hashem. And Hashem tells him, go to the land of Israel. Move out of town, go to a place where I will show you. And this happens when he's 75 years old, halfway through his life. And he goes. He goes with a lot of people. He doesn't just go himself. The Torah says that he took with him a multitude of people, all those converts that he made, he brought closer to Hashem. And it says, to make the long story short, that Avram accepted upon himself to fulfill all the mitzvahs of the Torah. All the mitzvahs of the Torah. Except for one. Which one mitzvah?
Bris.
Bris, exactly. The mitzvah of bris he did not do. He waited till Hashem told him to do it. And you'll remember that I once gave a whole explanation as to why that he'd wait with this one mitzvah, if you're going to do them all, why not this one? So obviously some people will say, well, that hurts. So but that's obviously not possible. A man that's ready to jump into a fire for Hashem is not worried about a few days of a little surgery. So why did he wait? This one mitzvah till he was 99 years old. He didn't do it. He did sukkah, he did tefillin, he did everything. In his way, however he did it. He knew all the mitzvahs, he did them all, except for this mitzvah. Why? The answer is that Avram was the beginning. We learned in Tanya just now about the revelation of God at Mount Sinai. Avram was the beginning of that. That's really the truth. It says that the first millennium was the millennium of chesed, of whatever, long lives. People lived for 1,000 years, 900 years. The second was the creation. The first 2,000 years, it says, was 2,000 years of chaos. The world was a crazy world. People did whatever they want. They got away with it. And the second 2,000 years, the 2,000 years of Torah. That's the third millennium, and the fourth millennium is when the Torah was given. But who was born in the end of the second millennium, in the beginning, and lived his life at the beginning of all of this? Abraham. So he started this process of the 2 millenniums of Torah. The last 2 millenniums that we're in is the millennium of the coming of Mashiach, I think it says. So who's the beginning of it? Avram. And we explained to you once the difference between the mitzvahs that Avram did and the mitzvahs that we do after the Torah was given. That the differences between heaven and earth. A mitzvah that we do post Sinai has within it the essence of Hashem. Hashem invested his own essence into Torah and mitzvahs, something that was not available to Avraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov and all those that did the mitzvahs before. When a Yid puts on tefillin terei, and when a woman goes to the mikveh, light Shabbos candles, she is in touch with Hashem's essence. It says that, what's the first word of Torah? Anoichi. Hashem Lekecha. I am God your Lord. What does the word Anoichi stand for? It's an Egyptian word. Did you know that? Why doesn't it say Ani Hashem Lekecha, which is a Hebrew way of saying it? What's Anoichi? Anoichi, it says, is an acronym of 4 words. The 4 Aramaic words are non nafshik savis yehovis. Hashem says, I, my soul, have given you and invested in the Torah. I mean, God put His essence in the Torah. When you put on film, you're in touch, you're wrapping at God's essence around you. That's something that Avram couldn't accomplish. Now, being that Avram is the father of the Jewish people and everything that we have from him, so if he didn't have this, so how do we have it? We don't have anything without getting it from our father Avram. So if Avram had no connection to real mitzvahs, he couldn't really have a connection with Hashem's essence. So how do we have it? Everything we have, our neshamas, we inherited from Avram. All our connection to God, we inherited from Avram. So if he didn't have any connection to such an idea, how do we? See, he understood that that he has to leave one mitzvah. One mitzvah has to have that power in it. What's the power? The power of Hashem's essence in that mitzvah. So he knew that there's one mitzvah that he has to wait for Hashem to give it to him. What's the difference between Hashem giving it to him and him doing it on his own? When a Yid does it, when a man does it on his own, so it's a human being, a creation, a physical limited entity, looking to have a relationship with something higher. How high? So you're limited in your scope. How much could you reach? How much could you experience? You can experience profound, great stuff, but not the essence of Hashem. It's not available to you. How does a Yid, a finite being, have a relationship with the essence, infinite God? Only God can open himself up to such a relationship. Only he can make himself available to you. You can't reach out and grasp the essence of Hashem. God can reach down and say, here, hold on to me. So all the mitzvahs that Avram did before Matan Torah, before God reached down and said, hold on to me, he couldn't hold on to him. It wasn't available to him. He was a good man, reaching upward, but is limited. Therefore, he had to wait with one mitzvah at least, that God reached down to him and said, here, hold on to me. And I want to elaborate on this mitzvah tonight, the mitzvah of the bris. Why it's such a fundamental mitzvah. Because one can ask, why did Hashem choose the bris to be that one mitzvah? He could have chosen any mitzvah, the sukkah. Could have said, okay, you do everything. Sukkah, I'll tell you to do it. You understand the difference between us doing it on our own initiative and Hashem reaching down and saying, here, I'm giving you now the opportunity to connect to me. So you needed to wait with one such mitzvah at least. With that one mitzvah at least, we have the ability to do all the mitzvahs like that. Avram needed to have that kind of relationship with God in order for us to have that relationship. Because we don't have anything without Avram. We get everything from our father Abraham. So therefore there was a need for at least one mitzvah where he's in touch with the essence of Hashem in order so that our 613 should be at the same level. But if he didn't have even that one mitzvah like that, we wouldn't have any connection like that either. So he needed to wait for one mitzvah where Hashem reached down to him and said, here, I want you to have a connection to me on my level. And that was with the bris. But why the bris? Why not some other mitzvah? That's the question I want to answer tonight. The Rebbe explains in a Sikha that the truth is that the mitzvah of bris is a reflection of all of Torah mitzvahs. Of all of Torah mitzvahs. Of the whole Torah. Why? What is it about the bris, the circumcision, that reflects all the mitzvahs? She explains like this. The bris has in it three components. The mitzvah has three components. Number one is the act of circumcision. The act of circumcision. To cut away the foreskin. The second component is that you're no longer an oral. An oral is an uncircumcised individual, someone that has a foreskin. There's an oral, someone prior to the bris. He's considered an uncircumcised individual. Then there is the act of the bris itself. And then there is the the outcome, which means that you are now circumcised. So there's uncircumcised, the act, and now being circumcised. Sounds like a little bit like semantics, right? So the Rebbe explains like this. You see it in halacha, you see the difference between these three. For example, if someone is born without a foreskin, imagine a man is born without a foreskin. So he's not an uncircumcised person. He is a circumcised. He's you can consider him someone that's circumcised. He's born circumcised. But he doesn't have the act of circumcision. So he's missing something important in the mitzvah of mila. So what should such a person do? So there's such a thing called hatofas dam bris. Such a person has to take a needle and draw blood from that area in order to have the action of mila, the action of circumcision, even though he's not cutting anything, but he has to draw blood. That's the law. You know that. So there we see that it's not just enough to be circumcised or you're not uncircumcised. You need the action itself. On the other hand, you have another scenario. For example, a person who had a bris when he was 8 days old, but later on in the Mishnah talks about such a thing, that a person can draw and create the situation where he can once again draw upon himself a foreskin. I don't know how it works, but he can. I guess there's some method that he can create where it looks like he was never circumcised.
Certainly with today's medical
okay, whatever, you can do it. Yeah. So this person had a circumcision. Perhaps you can consider him circumcised, because he did circumcise himself. But you can't consider him not uncircumcised. Because he has this. No, you can't consider him. He may still be in the category of someone uncircumcised. Because he has now a foreskin again. You understand? So he has two, but not the third. So this is a problem. He can't get away with such a thing. On the other hand, there's another law. This is all in halacha. A person that was born with two foreskins, and he cut off one. Yeah. Again, I never saw such a thing, but there could be. Now, halacha talks about such a thing. Person born with two foreskins. Either on the same. I don't know. I'm not familiar how that would work, but I'm not going to get into the details of it. But a man that was born with two foreskins and then cut off one, he had a bris on one of them. He had the act of circumcision. He's considered someone that's circumcised. At the same time, he's still considered someone uncircumcised. Because the other foreskin is still there. So he has 2 out of the 3. In each case, you have 2 out of the 3. And you have to make sure that then that's not enough. So here we see that all 3 components are important. Now let's understand what the meaning of all this is. It says in the Rambam, the Gvaiter perplexed. The Rambam tries to explain intellectually, logically, why Hashem told us to have a circumcision. By the way, in one other area, in another place, the Rebbe says, you may ask, what's with women? A woman she doesn't have the act of circumcision. So the Rebbe explained that the very birth of a woman accomplishes all 3. However it works. The spiritual accomplishment she has. Okay. So both male and female have all 3. They're not circumcised. They're circumcised. They're not uncircumcised, and they have the act of circumcision. All 3. What are these 3? What does the Rambam say about this? Well, he tries to explain this mitzvah. He says, what's the ultimate purpose of Torah and mitzvahs? Rabbi Hananya ben Akasha, you remember that Mishnah? We say it every day during by the Kaddish. Rabbi Hananya ben Akasha says, God wanted to make the Jewish people meritorious. No. Sorry, that's a different. What's the ultimate purpose of Torah mitzvahs? It says, the rabbis tell us, "Litzarav b'emes habriyos," to purify man, to perfect man, to make him holier, more refined, more elevated, more spiritual. The Rambam says that this is emphasized very much in the mitzvah of the bris, because he says that when you take away the foreskin, it accomplishes that you reduce the passion and the desire of the physical flesh, I don't know, by half or by a great amount, especially in that area of the body. That's what the Rambam says. Cutting away the foreskin reduces the passion of that part of your body, and therefore the whole body, by a great amount. What does that accomplish? What's the cause of people to sin, not to follow the Torah, and so on and so forth? Their passion for physical, materialistic things. So the first thing you do when a kid is 8 days old, you reduce it by half. You cut away the foreskin, half of the passion is gone. A person reduces his desire for physical by half, or by whatever the number is, by a great amount. And in this, there's 3 steps. All of Torah is made up of two parts. There's the positive and the negative. Don't eat pork. Don't eat on Yom Kippur. Don't lie. Don't cheat. And then there's the positives. Learn Torah, give charity, put up a mezuzah on your door, put on tefillin, all the positive mitzvahs. What is the reason for the negative mitzvahs? The negative mitzvahs gives us the opportunity to stay away. That gives us the ability. In other words, God tells us what not to do, because if you do that, that brings you down. It coarsens you. In order to benefit from a positive mitzvah, to have the effect of tefillin, of tzitzis, of mikveh, of candles, of Shabbos candles, Chanukah candles, in order to have the effect on your soul and on your body, you cannot be coarse and fachazit, as we say. You can't be completely engrossed in physical pleasures and physical desires. So Hashem says, though these are the things, in order for you to enjoy the positive effects of a positive mitzvah, you have to remove yourself from the negative effects of a negative. And those are the 2 things. Not to be circumcised, and not to be uncircumcised. There's something in the mitzvah of mila, you shouldn't be an oral. An oral is an uncircumcised person. It's not enough to be circumcised. It's important that you're not uncircumcised. You need both elements. It's not enough that you cut away your foreskin. If you have another foreskin, you're low. So the Torah doesn't want you to have any foreskin. It doesn't want you to be uncircumcised. It's the sur merah. Remove yourself from the negative. It's a reflection of all the negative commandments. Then the act of circumcision, being circumcised, there's the positive effects. You're now clean, you're now holy, you're now purified. You reduced your passion by half, it's great. You're a circumcised person. And that's an important component of the mitzvah of mila, of the mitzvah of the bris. But then there's the act of the bris itself, the cutting, the act of the cutting. And the Rebbe explains that is the 3rd component of all of Torah mitzvahs. And he says it as follows. You have people that are born with a tremendous passion for physical pleasure. They can't get enough. They're almost addicted. But they want more and more. They're never satisfied. But then you have people that are cold-blooded. They're born very cold-blooded. They don't have passion for anything. Passion for negative. They can sit and learn Torah for 10 hours. It's almost natural for them. They don't need all the other. They don't need the rest. Let's go to a good restaurant. Let's go on a good vacation. Leave me alone. I'm not in the mood. They're not in the mood. They don't have that passion. It's almost like they're born circumcised. They're born circumcised. They don't have a foreskin. They're born without a foreskin. They're born without a foreskin. Most people are not like that, but there's some people, they're cold-blooded. Their natural disposition is to be a little more spiritual. So is that great? No, I wish everyone, it would be the best thing. No, if you have a natural tendency to be godly, it's not enough. What's the law of someone who's born circumcised? So he's considered, he doesn't have a foreskin, he's considered circumcised. So machai, great. No, it's not great. What do you have to do? To take a needle, you have to draw blood. Why? Why? Because Torah mitzvah, to have a relationship with Hashem, you have to work at it. It can't be natural. If it's coming easy to you, it's not Aveda. You're not a servant of God. We learned that in Tanya also, by the way, chapter 15, if you remember. The man's born circumcised, leave him alone. It's a machai. He doesn't have the negative effects of the non-circumcised foreskin. He has the effects of being circumcised. Leave him alone. No, he has to draw blood. Why does he have to draw blood? Because Torah and mitzvah has to come with effort. You cannot do this if it's your natural disposition, you're not serving God. That's not called a servant of God. So what happens? So I gave you an example of a person that's born to begin with a natural disposition to serving God. What happens if a person is not born that way, but trains himself? He's a 15-year-old bacher in yeshiva, he works hard on himself. By the time he's 20, he loves learning. He didn't love it when he was 15, but now he does. So he circumcised himself. He went through the act of circumcision. He broke himself. He broke away from negatives, and he put himself into learning, put himself into davening, put himself into doing mitzvahs. But by the time he's 20, it's natural to him. No good? Now, that's great. But now, you have to go a step above to now work on those things that now are not natural to you. You have to always make progress. You always have to circumcise yourself. Because that reduces the passion. That reduces your distance from Hashem. You follow what I'm saying? So the mitzvah of the bris is an encompassing mitzvah. It represents all of the whole relation with God. This three-step it's a three-pronged program. You're born negative with a foreskin. You have to remove it. In other words, you have to be foreskinless. You have to be foreskinless, but it's not enough that it happened by itself, naturally. You have to do it to yourself. That's the second step. It's not enough that you're born without a foreskin. Even then, you have to still hurt yourself. What is it, hurting yourself? Breaking yourself. I'm a servant of God. This is not going to come easy. And then you consider it circumcised.
But you still have to
so it's not enough that you're foreskinless, which means you're not an odal. It's also not enough that you already did the mila. You're considered someone that circumcised himself. You have to continuously do the act of circumcision. And that's true with all of Torah mitzvahs. It's a reflection of our whole relationship with Hashem. That's the mitzvah that Avraham waited for. If there was one mitzvah he had to wait for, that Hashem should give him that power. And guess what? There's another reason, by the way. Because that's the mitzvah that's attached to the body. That's one mitzvah. It says David HaMelech, he was always wearing tefillin, the talis. He was always enwrapped in a mitzvah, always. But when he went to the bathhouse, he said he was depressed. He was very sad that he's naked of mitzvahs. Until he reminded himself, I'm not. I have a bris. So the mitzvah of mila is the one that is etched in your flesh. So that's another reason why that's the mitzvah, because that really gets to the nitty-gritty of a yid. But in this sikh, the Rebbe explains the 3 steps of the bris and how that's a reflection of the whole Torah mitzvahs. It's a mirror, it's a microcosm of the whole Torah. Sur meira, asay teiv, and it should not come easy. It has to come with effort. So if you're born naturally inclined to doing mitzvahs, it's great, believe me, I wish that was the case. But then you still have to take a needle and draw blood, meaning you have to work on something. You can't rely that, because you're not serving Hashem, you're self-serving. It's not your natural disposition, it's self-serving. That's not what Torah is. You want a relationship with God, not with your nature, with your natural self.
Wasn't Moshe around already?
Yeah, Moshe was born
so what
circumcised.
About him?
So he had to do that.
He had to do it?
Yeah, sure. That's why a convert that was, his mother converted him when he was a baby for health reasons, whatever reason. He wasn't Jewish, and he became Jewish. So he must draw blood from that area.
So
and the reason is because Hashem, at the end of the day, Hashem wants the whole purpose of Torah mitzvahs is to elevate the physical body. It's not enough to elevate your neshama, your soul. It's important to elevate your body. And the bris does that. It reduces your passion for negative by half. So that's already a great thing. And then the rest of Torah mitzvahs does the rest. You know, the more you connect to Hashem, the more your body becomes more refined. But that's what all Torah mitzvahs is, the body to become refined. Less coarse, less selfish, less self-centered. The bris does that for you. And it's a 3-step process. It can't come naturally. It has to be done with effort. You'll do it. You have to do it. You can't have your mother do it for you. So even if you're born circumcised, you have both aspects complete for you, you still need a third. Stayst. So Avraham Avinu waited for that mitzvah for Hashem to tell him. When Hashem told him, Hashem opened a new window for him to connect to Hashem on Hashem's level, on Hashem's terms, not on our own terms, which is very limited. So that was that one mitzvah. And that's what Hashem tells him before the bris. He says, listen to the words that Hashem tells him. With this I'll conclude. He says to him like this. God revealed to him when he was 99 years old. And he said, walk before me and be perfect. The bris made Avram perfect.
How did you know about mitzvot? How did you know about Sukkot, Pesach?
What?
If Hashem didn't tell him. How did you know about Sukkot and Pesach?
How did he know about any mitzvah? He had Ruach HaKodesh. He had a prophetic knowledge of this. How did he know anything?
So the effort...
He was a great tzaddik. He was one of the...
Rabbi.
Yeah.
The effort that we put forth is never finished. When Mashiach comes, it will be finished, but the effort we put forth... But the effort itself is a blessing.
That's the most important component of Torah mitzvahs is the effort that's put into it. The whole mitzvah is to be a servant, to serve Hashem. A servant is someone that does it against his will. If that's all if you really want to do it, then you have to always look for something higher. Now you have to do it. Now you have to go to the parts that you don't want to do. What happens is, it's a slow process, yeah? For example, a person that takes upon himself to learn a half hour every day. Beginning, when he starts doing it, it's very hard. Very hard to train yourself. But when you do it for 4 or 5 months, you know what happens? When you don't learn a day, you feel like something's wrong. It's like I didn't eat breakfast today. You feel unfulfilled, so it became natural already for you. So now half an hour is not enough anymore. Now you have to go to 45 minutes. Because if it's natural to you, then you got to go to the next step. If the minute it became your second nature, you have to look for something that's an effort. So that's the constant climb. That's the constant making the body more refined and more. When Mashiach comes, it'll be completely transformed, which is what we learned before in Tanya. But this starts with Avram and with the mitzvah of bris. And the 3 steps. And it's a reflection of the whole Torah. Have a wonderful day, night, and a good week. See you back next week.
Amen.
You should call.